I was used to the quiet hum of the night, the kind of stillness that settled over the city like a blanket, leaving only the occasional car passing by or the rustle of leaves in the wind. But on this particular night, something felt off. Something was about to disrupt the calm. It started with the phone call. I had been lying in bed, trying to get some sleep after a long week of work. My apartment was dark, and the only light came from the faint glow of the city lights creeping through the blinds. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, and I groggily reached for it, expecting a late-night text or spam call, like usual. But when I saw the name on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code seemed familiar, too familiar. It was the same area code as my hometown, a small town I had left behind years ago. I hadn't spoken to anyone from there in months, and certainly not at this hour. "Hello," I answered, my voice groggy and unsure. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear breathing, but no words. My hand tightened around the phone, a chill creeping up my spine. I was about to hang up, thinking it was just another prank call, when I heard it, a voice, soft but urgent. "You need to come back," the voice whispered. It was a voice I didn't recognize, but somehow, it felt hauntingly familiar. "It's happening again." My heart raced as memories of my childhood began to resurface. My small town, once a peaceful place, had been the backdrop of a strange and chilling event that I had long tried to forget. No one talked about it anymore, and I had promised myself that I never would. But the words, "it's happening again," brought it all back, everything I had tried to bury. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at it in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after all these years. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What do you mean, it's happening again?" But the line went dead. The sound of silence filled my ears, and I was left staring at the phone, unable to process what had just happened. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. The fear that had been growing in the pit of my stomach slowly began to spread through my entire body. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, holding the phone in my hand, unsure of what to do. Should I go back? Should I even care? Part of me wanted to ignore the call, pretend it was a mistake, but I knew I couldn't. The words echoed in my mind. "It's happening again." I had to go back. The memories of that night, the night everything changed, were too strong. I couldn't escape them any longer. I threw on some clothes, grabbed my jacket, and left the apartment. The streets were empty, the city's nightlife fading into the distance as I made my way to my car. The engine roared to life as I sped down the road, heading toward the small town I had once called home. As I drove, the city lights slowly faded, replaced by the darkness of the countryside. The air felt colder, the trees taller, casting long, eerie shadows on the road. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something waiting for me to return. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to focus on the road ahead. I kept thinking back to the voice, the words that had sent a shiver down my spine. "It's happening again." But what did that even mean? What could possibly be happening again? The town was still miles away, but I could already feel the weight of it pressing down on me. The memories, the fear, the unknown. It was all coming back, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I reached the outskirts of the town just as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. The roads here were unfamiliar, the streets empty, the houses dark and still. But there was something else, something in the air that didn't belong. The silence was thick, unnatural. It was as if the town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I turned onto the familiar street that led to my childhood home, the house I hadn't seen in years. It loomed in front of me, dark and silent, just like everything else. But I didn't stop. I drove past it, further into the heart of the town, my heart pounding louder with each passing second. That's when I saw it. The old church at the end of the street. It had always been there, but now, something was different. The lights were on. The door, once sealed shut, was slightly ajar. And from inside, I could see a faint glow, an eerie, otherworldly light that made my skin crawl. I parked the car and stepped out, my breath fogging in the cold morning air. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I walked toward the church, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The door creaked open as I pushed it, revealing the dark interior. And that's when I heard it. A voice. But this time, it wasn't on the phone. It was coming from within the church. I hesitated at the threshold of the church, the door groaning on its hinges as if inviting me inside. The voice, faint but distinct, seemed to grow louder the closer I got. It was a whisper, but its urgency was unmistakable. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of old wood and dust. The faint glow I had seen from the street was now more pronounced, emanating from the far corner of the church where the altar stood. It was as if the light itself was alive, pulsing with an energy I couldn't understand. The pews, once neatly arranged, were now scattered haphazardly, as if something or someone had been in a hurry. My steps felt like they were dragging, as though the weight of the room was pulling me deeper into its mystery. The voice echoed again, and this time, I could hear the words clearly. "Help us." I froze. The sound wasn't coming from a person, but something else. A whispering, shifting, undulating sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. The walls of the church felt like they were closing in on me, and I felt an overwhelming urge to turn and run. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Something told me I had no choice but to move forward. I walked toward the altar, the pulsing light growing brighter with each step. As I approached, the light flickered, and I saw a figure standing in the shadows behind it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't. A man stood there, or rather, something that resembled a man. His features were distorted, his face twisted in a way that made my stomach churn. His eyes glowed with a sickly yellow hue, and his mouth moved as though he were chanting something in a language I couldn't understand. His body was unnaturally thin, his arms long and gangly, as though they didn't belong on a human. I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound got caught in my throat. My chest tightened, and I felt as though I couldn't breathe. The figure raised one of its arms, pointing toward the altar, and the whispering voices grew louder, more frantic. "Help us," they repeated, but this time, it wasn't just one voice. It was hundreds, thousands, filling the church with a cacophony of desperate pleas. I could feel the air around me crackling with energy, an electric hum that made my skin prickle. I wanted to look away, to run as far as I could, but my body wouldn't obey. I was trapped, paralyzed by fear, but also by some invisible force that kept me tethered to that spot. The figure stepped forward, his movements jerky, unnatural. As he drew closer, I saw that his eyes were not just glowing. They were hollow, black pits, sucking in the light around them. The voices now sounded like a chant, a rhythm that pulsed through the church. I could feel it in my bones, in my blood, vibrating in the air. "Why are you here?" the figure hissed, its voice distorted and garbled, like something not meant for human ears. "You should have never come back." I stumbled backward, my heart racing in my chest. My mind screamed at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. It was as if the ground beneath me had solidified into stone. "Leave," the figure growled, the darkness around him seeming to thicken, wrapping itself around my body like chains. "Or become one of us." The room began to spin, and I could feel my vision blurring. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. The memories of my past, the strange happenings, the disappearances, the rumors, began flooding back. I had left this place years ago, trying to escape it all. But now, it seemed like the past was reaching out to pull me back in. I had to get out of here. With every ounce of strength I had left, I forced myself to turn and run. My legs finally obeyed, and I bolted toward the door, the sound of the whispers growing louder, more insistent. The air felt thick, almost suffocating as I sprinted through the church, the walls seeming to stretch and close in on me. Just as I reached the door, I turned back for a split second. The figure was standing at the altar, his eyes locked on me, his mouth forming a twisted grin. And then, as if he were a shadow, he disappeared. I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping for air, my legs shaking beneath me. The first light of morning was breaking across the horizon, but the terror I felt had nothing to do with the time of day. It was the realization that whatever I had just witnessed, it wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a dream. Something had changed. Something had awoken. I stumbled back to my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. I didn't know where to go or what to do. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that town. Not now. Not after what I had seen. I drove aimlessly, the streets flashing by in a blur. The voices still echoed in my ears, and the figure's face haunted me, his eyes seared into my memory. What had he meant? Become one of us. What did that even mean? As the sun rose higher in the sky, I realized I had driven far out of town into the dense woods that surrounded it. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands still shaking. I needed to think. I needed answers. But no matter how hard I tried to calm myself, the truth gnawed at me. Something was happening in that town, and I was somehow a part of it. I looked out at the vast stretch of trees before me, the quiet of the forest echoing in my mind. Whatever this was, whatever it had to do with me, I couldn't run from it anymore. I sat in my car, staring out at the endless stretch of trees, the silence pressing in from all sides. I could still hear the echoes of the whispers, faint but persistent, like they were embedded deep within my mind. The figure in the church, the man, or whatever it was, kept replaying in my thoughts. You should have never come back. The truth gnawed at me, twisted and disorienting. I thought I had escaped my past, that leaving the town behind would be enough to sever the connection. But now, I knew it wasn't just a past I could walk away from. It was something alive, something waiting. I needed answers, and I needed to confront whatever this was before it consumed me, before it dragged me back into that church. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I searched for any information about the church or the strange occurrences that had been plaguing my town. The connection was spotty out here in the woods, but after a few minutes, a name surfaced, the Hollowbrook cult. My heart skipped a beat. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I dug deeper, skimming through articles and reports. It didn't take long before I found the chilling details I had been dreading. The cult had been active in the town decades ago, operating under the radar for years. They were known for their strange rituals and the disappearances that seemed to follow them. And according to some of the more obscure reports, they had been linked to something far darker. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The cult wasn't just about rituals. They were said to practice an ancient, forbidden form of summoning, a ritual that required a specific sacrifice. I quickly scrolled through the rest of the article, my pulse quickening as I read that the cult had mysteriously disbanded years ago. Or so it seemed. But the last sentence of the article made my blood run cold. Some believed the cult had never truly disappeared, that their dark influence still lingered in the town, waiting for the right moment to return. My head was spinning. The figure in the church, the whispers, the strange force that had paralyzed me. It all made sense now. I wasn't just a random visitor. I was somehow connected to whatever had happened all those years ago. I had been pulled back into the web of this dark force. Suddenly, the phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me I couldn't. I answered quickly. Hello. There was a brief silence. Then a low, distorted voice responded, sending a chill down my spine. You're not safe. You're never safe. My heart hammered in my chest as I looked around the car, half expecting someone to be standing just outside the window. But there was nothing. The forest was still, too still. Who is this? I demanded, my voice shaking. The voice on the other end chuckled softly, a sound that made my skin crawl. You already know who I am, it whispered. You're marked. You came back, and now there's no escaping. The line went dead, the silence that followed suffocating. I dropped the phone in my lap, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Marked. That word haunted me. What did it mean? Why was I being pulled back into this nightmare? I drove back to town, the sun now hidden behind a thick veil of clouds. The storm was coming. I could feel it. I parked in front of the old church, the building now an imposing structure in the growing darkness. The windows were dark, the door shut tight, but the air around it felt charged. I could still hear the whispers, faint but there, calling me. I knew I couldn't avoid this anymore. I had to confront whatever was waiting inside. The door creaked open as I pushed it, stepping inside once more. The church was even darker than before, the oppressive silence pressing down on me like a weight. The light at the altar flickered again, and for a moment, I thought I saw the figure standing there, watching me. But then it was gone. I stood frozen in the center of the church, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The whispers were louder now, no longer a faint echo, but a cacophony of voices, all chanting the same thing. Help us. Help us. I felt the ground beneath me tremble, as though something was stirring deep below. The altar began to shake, and the air grew thick with energy. My heart pounded in my chest, every instinct telling me to turn and run. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The figure appeared again, standing before the altar, his glowing yellow eyes fixed on me. This time, he didn't move. He just stared, his mouth stretched in that grotesque grin. "You're too late," he hissed. "The ritual is already in motion. You can't stop it." I tried to speak, to plead, but no words came. I was paralyzed, unable to even scream. The whispers rose in volume, the voices overlapping, as if they were coming from the walls themselves. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the shaking stopped. The church fell into an eerie silence. The figure was gone. The light at the altar flickered one last time and then went out, leaving me in complete darkness. The whispers ceased. I stumbled backward, finally finding my voice. "What have you done? What is happening?" But there was no response. I ran out of the church, the cold night air hitting me like a slap to the face. As I reached my car, I turned back one last time. The church stood there, silent and still, as though nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. I didn't know what had truly been awakened or why it had chosen me, but one thing was clear. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. And I wasn't going to be able to outrun it.